Hey y'all, this is Brandon Lehman. We're doing keeping it clean using the smear technique today, and I thought we'd do a little watercolor. I got a different little palette here. You can pick up a palette, small little paint tin like this at Hobby Lobby or at Blick. You can even pick them up off of Amazon. Sometimes they come in tubes. The tubes are a little more expensive, and in order to make your watercolor last a long time, and you have your watercolors for a long time and you want to paint a whole bunch, you really want to water it down. It'll look more like a watercolor is really supposed to look, and it'll last you longer. I tend to use a lot of the color. It makes it more vibrant, but it really sells. So if you have something you really want to sell, you use to brighten the color a little. You want to make a fern, for instance. I was going to paint a fern today. We would use a darker green and more yellow, really brighten it up. It makes it eye-catching, so they wanna look, see what you're doing, even see what you got. Okay, so let's get started. Well, one more thing. There's a brush that I picked up. It is a brush that has multiple points. I don't know if you can see that real good. See that right there. And it's just what you can do if you can't find a brush like this is you can take a flat brush. It's just flat and straight across at the top. And you can take a knife and you can sort of scrape at it right there. A really sharp knife too. And you want to just carve out 2 or 3 bristles across here, and then 2 at the top, and you can make some really interesting designs. It tends to give you more ideas. So if you want to try that, you can also do that. Thought I'd add that tip today. Okay, so let's get started. I have my 16 by 20 regular canvas for watercolor that I usually paint with. You can use smaller canvases, but the bigger your canvas, the higher the price, so it sells even better. So I'm going to use a sword brush. It is a long brush with a diagonal across it, and it tends to fan out a bit. So you can probably make that brush if you can't find it. You can find a brush that fans out a bit, and I'll rotate it so you can see the full angle. But it fans out halfway, and then it goes down at an angle, and that's the brush that we're using. So I was going to go into some water. Using more water helps you to have a longer longevity of your oil paints, and it also helps to keep the cost of painting down. But you got to kind of gauge it. How much do you want to sell that one painting, or do you want to make multiple paintings or keep painting for longer? The choice is yours. You can save money, or you can just really paint more vibrant. Okay, show you what I did here. I have some sap green and I have some cadmium yellow, and I believe that is the regular hue of cadmium yellow, but I double loaded this brush. And when you double load a brush, you take it and you put water all in it, and then you just swipe it through the green first, really slowly, trying to get as much green on there as you can, and then you go through the cadmium yellow after that. So it's got the double loaded of green and cadmium yellow on the sword brush, and I added a little bit of a little bit of water right there to moisten the bristles enough to help them to flow across the canvas a little easier. So I'm going to paint a fern today, and I'm just starting. I'm going to make a little line here, and it just flows very nicely with the sword brush. But you want to take it, start with the tip pointing out, and you see that double loading, and then you want to let go when it comes to the stem. You want to take it and you press down, and then you just lay it off just so easily. and it just flows onto the canvas, and it's very pleasing to watch somebody paint like this. You can do it out in a park. You can go to a little hobbyist store. You can even paint in a parking lot, and you'll tend to gather a crowd. But if you can keep them coming back and keep painting in that same spot, maybe on the same day for several years or months, or you'll have a regular crowd that just likes to be inspired, and it actually inspires you to paint more and to come up with new designs because they've never seen this before, and it's so pleasing just to watch. And you can be your own Bob Ross. You can even be your own Leonardo da Vinci if you really wanted to. You can come up with new techniques, new ideas. Just listening to people when they talk as you're painting. They may say, I wish the mountain was so and so, and if you listen closely and just say very little, you can actually pick up some ideas from your audience. So I'm just using the sword brush here, making shorter strokes as I go to the top of the fern, and it's coming together pretty nicely. But I've given you a lot of tips today on how to sell because we do have the holidays coming up, and good time to sell because people want that perfect gift. I'm just going to get a little more yellow here and double load it with a little more green, adding a little of the water area too, and just vary those colors and just pressing gently at the end and then really pressing harder and then letting off where it touches the vine of the fern, the stem of the fern. You have different shades, and it's very pleasing. And people just come and gather, and they'll watch you paint, and just make you feel good, make you feel like painting more. And it's actually called a certain type of painting, called in plein air. In plein air comes from an artist in France who actually invented the tubes of paint. Before then, it was in the 1800s too, I believe 1805 to be specific. But Pierre Lafayette was his name. I may not be pronouncing it right or correctly. He invented a recipe for each color, and he began producing paints, and he would put them into tubes so that he could take them out in the plein air, So that was the name of his technique that he invented. And what he could do with in plein air was he could see the sunlight, the way the sunlight was shining on, say, a tree, or the way it was in that light, and it would just be different as it was in a studio. And art really began to take off in France around that time. And I believe it might have been, let's see, I'm trying to think of the name of the school where he taught classes at, or he took classes at. It's in France somewhere, I'm not quite sure. You'll have to forgive me for that one. I don't have that information. But you can tell people that paint actually wasn't around until 1805. Not in tubes. Artists actually would go out into the woods and they would find flowers or vines and they would grind them up and make their own colors. So it was hard to reproduce a certain design that you made because you would have to go out and find the exact flower, exact plant, and reproduce that paint. So you can really reproduce your art several different times, or you can take one piece of your artwork, and say you're painting a landscape, and you can add it to even a floral. You can take a mountain and put it behind the ferns. I'm just doing a really feng shui, simplistic painting today. This looks really great with the feng shui decorations, if you have that in your house. Get a little more water here. Just adding some more water to my mixture. So there really is a whole lot to painting. You can just sit out there, you can not explain, you can get people to talking, and maybe they might even say to somebody else, you should really come watch this guy paint. I mean, he's just a lot of fun watching. It's like it's in plain air is the style, he said. You tell him the style, and it really makes it seem like you know what you're doing more. Gain confidence with every painting, with every one that just shows up. Makes you a little less nervous and more apt to come up with new things instead of getting nervous and not making quite what you wanted. You just gain confidence to try something new on your design. You can use my designs if you want to sell them. That's fine. The only thing copywritten from me is my video, so you just can't make the same video that I just made, and that's all. But you can take these images, you can sell them, you can piece them together from other paintings I've done on keeping it clean using the smear technique, and you can make a work of art. You can begin to learn how to compose art, and it's really like music. You take something that just flows with something else, a mountain, a landscape. You can begin to learn wildlife. Wildlife is very attractive, but very difficult to do. But it sells like crazy. It will go very fast. Probably because a lot of people can't paint wildlife, mostly. They've never tried. And it's just more difficult. So it's worth a higher price, or even really taking the time to learn to draw. You learn to draw wildlife, and then you get to I would say your coloring pencils, or even pastels, which are your little crayons that are chalk, soft pastel, and then you have oil pastel. You can learn how each color works. You can learn how each color makes a certain effect. And you can even use paint thinner with the oil pastels. That's something else that I sort of came up with. And you can really paint with the oil pastel. And you can come up with different ways to use tortillons, for instance. Tortillons are the smudge sticks that usually are used in charcoal to smudge out and to make a shading or lessen the amount of charcoal you just put on the paper. Well, you can take a tortillon and you can dip it into paint thinner, odorless paint thinner, and you can take the oil pastel that you already have drawn with, and you have your basic shape, and you can take the tip of that tortillon, which is a rolled up piece of paper that is pressed. It is pressed really firmly together, and it pays to buy those. I would say make your own, but it pays to buy them, unfortunately. But they do have a very low price. So you can dip that in a small bottle of odorless paint thinner, and you can make the drawing look more smooth, really realistic, like a photo. You can do that. There are so many different things you can do.